Okay, good morning, folks. Yes, good to be here today, and today it feels like autumn, for sure. Wherever you are, I hope you are enjoying the weather and being present to your experience, whether or not you are. Today, my talk is titled Upward and Backward. And I hope you've all had a chance to enjoy the icon that Victor posted on Facebook, which is, I think, a very creative and very apt image. In this practice of the Dharma, I like to keep going back to the first two stages of the Eightfold Path, which is right understanding and right motivation. Right understanding is sometimes called right view. That is how we see the practice, how we understand it in regard to our life. And right motivation is about why we do the practice. For what purpose am I doing this, you say? So these are questions that we can ask ourselves periodically as a way of checking to see if we're in alignment with the Buddha Dharma, or if we've gotten kind of hijacked by the cultural norms that we live in, which is very, very easy for us to do. The culture is kind of like the water we swim in. It's very difficult to do that without getting wet. In other words, without conforming, adapting, absorbing some of the cultural norms. Whether we like it or not, it tends to happen. And one we have, which is not uniquely American, but it's really pronounced with Americans, and that is what I call the phenomenon of the upward and onward syndrome. That we engage in everything with this perspective that it's supposed to get only better. We're supposed to move only forward or upward. And any kind of aberration or deviation from that particular mental model is seen as a failure or as a backsliding or as something that's problematic. The problem with that viewpoint is that it's not right view. It's not consistent with nature. It's not consistent with the way things are. So what happens with the practice so often, as I've encountered over many, many years of talking with students, as well as with my own practice, that when we begin the practice, typically there's aspiration, high motivation. And very often, when we first begin the practice, it feels pretty good because we're able to perhaps feel more alive, perhaps feel more freer, perhaps feel a bit happier, maybe more relaxed. And so this positive feedback fuels us to continue the practice. Because after all, the cultural norm is, if it feels good, you keep doing it. And if it doesn't feel good, why, you stop. And so what happens with our practice is almost inevitably, if not absolutely inevitably, we come to the point where we don't feel good when we do the practice. And very often this is because after a while, the unconscious or subconscious, depending on which terminology, I use them synonymously pretty much. The unconscious begins to awaken and to move towards the experience of revealing itself to us as we sit still and as we open. And what reveals itself to us is what needs to be healed within us. In the Christian contemplative practice, they sometimes refer to that as the divine psychotherapy. In other words, the psyche, the divine, however you want to phrase it, nature, will reveal to us that which we need to see to be healed. And this is being revealed because it's probably been hidden for a long, long time. Likely we didn't even know that it was there. And the reason that it's been hidden for a long, long time is because it's painful. It's difficult. It challenges our self-image. It challenges our sense of how things should be, or how I should be, or what life is about. And so very often, students are concerned by this. I was doing so well, I hear people say, and then bam, all of a sudden, all this stuff, and I won't use the exact language they use necessarily, but all this stuff comes up, and it doesn't feel good. You know, what's wrong? How can I fix this problem? Well, what's wrong is simply the way we're seeing it. There's never anything wrong with what is. The only thing wrong is our perception of what is. And even that's not wrong, but our perception of what is can cause us suffering if it's not aligned with reality. And then another phenomenon is that we tend to think of, most people tend to think of Buddhism as sort of letting go of everything. I should be non-attached. And all this stuff comes up and it's very much attached to us. We don't want it to be, but it is. It's kind of like a leech or something that gets attached to our body, and it doesn't want to let go. So the question often arises, how do I let go of this? And the subtext is, how do I let go of this so I can continue to go onward and upward? So oftentimes, another metaphor that shows up is like the diver with the belt, with a weighted belt. You know, we keep letting go of pieces of the belt, letting go of the weights on the belt. And when we do that, why, we should rise automatically up towards the light, forever upwards and onwards. So here's where right understanding is very important, as well as right practice. And I guess the best way to explain it, it comes back to the riverboat gambler. You remember that one? You got to know when to hold them and to know when to fold them. So when to cultivate non-identification and letting go is looking at where we have habitually been identified. And habitually, we have been identified with our story, with the mind's story of who I am and what is true and how things should be and what Buddhism is and where I should be going and blah-da-da-da. So that's a good thing to let go of. Because it's not what is. The fact that we're thinking is what is, but the content of our thought is not mirroring reality, if it ever does. What we want to let go of is all preconceived ideas about what should or shouldn't be, and bring our awareness to what is. So that's when we fold them, I guess. That's when we toss our cards in and say, I'm going to sit this one out. I'm going to let go of this story. And when we do that, we become aware of emotions and sensations in the body more directly. And as we do so, if the emotions, if the sensations are unpleasant, then that's all the more motivation to want to let them go. But what needs to happen is this part of ourself needs to be embraced. Because the self that we're identified with is a particular self-image, which is a story, so to speak, a construct. And as I let go of that self-image, what begins to show up usually is what's just the opposite of the self-image. You can think of the self-image as a mask or a persona. A little bit like the Phantom of the Opera, if you will. And when we allow the mask to fall off, which we do in meditation, then oftentimes the apparent ugliness and pain that's behind it becomes revealed. That's when it's so easy to want to put that mask on or put another mask on. You know, where's my Buddha mask? Let me put my Buddha face on. But the practice is about looking at what's here, whatever it is. So, embracing those parts of ourself, the energy of self that has been hidden and repressed for a long time. And it may feel like a very young part of ourself. It may feel very unlike who I am. It may be discouraged by our family, our friends. So we have all this incentive to want to shut it down or let it go, which again can be reinforced by a misunderstanding of the Dharma practice. Well, this anger, this rage, or the shame, or whatever it is shows up. So how do I let go of it? How do I get rid of it? And that's when they come to conference. That's the question that's often presented. What's wrong and how do I get rid of it? And we discover that these parts of ourselves are kind of like the tar babies. I refer to this as the tar baby effect. And that is, the harder we try to get rid of it, the harder we punch it, the more stuck we get. The more we try to push it away, the more embroiled we become in it. So it's important to remember the basic teaching of the practice in the Four Noble Truths. And this, again, is the core of right seeing and right motivation. And that is to notice if there is attachment to something, like there's attachment to our story, typically, then it's time to be willing to let go. And there again, I say be willing, because if we try to throw it away, it's going to be like the tar baby once again. So what we do is we just see it. We open our mind, so to speak, like an open hand, and we take our attention from it. We say, this is not who I really am. I come back to the breath, or I come back to the present moment. If there is resistance, pushing away, this is not me. I refuse to accept this experience. Then, you know what I'm going to say, then the work is that we open our heart and we be willing to embrace this experience. And as we embrace the experience, an interesting thing tends to happen. And that is, the nature of the experience itself will often change. As I embrace that monster with love, it's no longer a monster. There's a great story from the Christian tradition, and I can't remember which, I think it was St. Francis, one of the St. Francis's, of Assisi, I believe, but I don't know. I don't even know if it's true, but it's a great teaching. St. Francis loved all beings. He loved God. But he stumbled whenever he was in the presence of a leper. And understandably so. You know, what they called leprosy in those days was highly contagious and very disfiguring. And the leper was the ultimate social outcast. So it's said that at one point, St. Francis got to the point where he was willing to embrace the leper. So a leper came down the road, and St. Francis greeted him, talked with him a bit, and said, may I embrace you? May I give you my love? And so the leper moved the cloth away, and there was this horribly disfigured face. And St. Francis kissed this face on the cheeks and embraced this being with love. And as he stepped back, he no longer saw a leper, but he saw the Christ standing there before him. And he recognized that that leper was the Christ all along. But that was his own perception that was seeing this leper in the reaction to it. So embracing all parts of ourself is the healing of the shadow, if you will. But we don't do any of this to get upward and onward, you see. That's challenging that mindset. We are here to love without attachment. We're here to be aware without judgment. To all of these parts of ourselves that come up in the present moment. That's really all that we ever need to do. And so anytime you feel like you're slipping, sliding, or get stuck, sometimes that's another word I hear a lot, I feel stuck. And my response usually is we can only be stuck if we're trying to get somewhere. If we're not trying to go anywhere, we can't be stuck. We're just where we are. So, I invite you in your practice to think of the riverboat gambler and to trust that Dharma riverboat gambler within you that knows when to hold them and when to fold them. And to continue doing your practice with right intention, right motivation. And thank you for sharing your practice, and thank you for being with us this morning.